I mostly do show feeds, and then I also do equine. So that's kind of a little bit about what I do at Ovid. I'm just going to be talking about the mix that we have that will be floor stocked at Ovid. It's just the Ovid show steer. It's a 12% protein, 3% fat, and 18% fiber. So it's a high fiber diet, more so than just a regular meal mix, which helps expand the gut. It has corn, has baby beef, and then cottonseed hulls, oats, barley, all that good stuff in it. So it's made up of, it's comparable kind of to a bagged show feed like Formula Champions that we'll be talking about with Tyler in just a little bit, maybe just a little bit on the cheaper end. It does have a pellet called NutriVantage in it. NutriVantage is a pellet that helps with intake, so increases feed intake, feed efficiency, and optimizes feed efficiency. So that's a really great product that's in our show feed. Helps with stress. We all know that when we're taking calves to shows, it can stress them out, especially at a younger age. So that's something we added into our feed, just to be kind of something that helps from day one to minimize that stress on those calves. So keeps them on feed when we take them. Sometimes they tend to get a little finicky and not necessarily want to stay on feed while we're at the shows, and that's super important as we want to keep them full and look their best on that day. So that's something we added into that feed just to help with that a little bit. I'm using it right now with some of our calves, and it definitely helps. They go right after the feed. It doesn't matter how hot, or if we're moving them from the pasture up to the barn, or whatever the situation might be that day, it definitely helps keep them on that feed. They've never really shied away from feed at all. So that's kind of personal experience with the feed that we're using, and using as our floor stock. So other than that, I'm going to talk about Winning Fill, which we are going to be giving away a bag of it today. This is a Kent product. It also has NutriVantage in it, which is, like I said, super good for stress. A lot of people use this either at the shows to also keep them on feed. It's forage based, and it has steam flaked corn and barley in it, which also helps their digestive system. So it kind of keeps that ruminant healthy, especially when we're hauling. And if in the springtime, hopefully we can haul a lot more this year than we did this past year in season, to keep them on that feed. Sometimes they eat the feed every single day at home. When we move them, for some reason they shy away from it because they're not in their ideal situation at home. So this is a little bit different than just a regular feed. It's forage based, and so if you guys look in your folders, there's a picture on the flyer of what it looks like. So it kind of looks like hay, kind of mixed with like a show feed type deal, so it's different to them, and it smells good, and so it smells like something they're going to want to eat. So that's something cool that you can add into kind of your feed plan as you're traveling to those shows. It's high fiber because it's forage based and has those steam flaked grains in it, so it helps expand that gut also at the same time while it does keep them on that show feed. So those are kind of a couple things that we have to offer at Ovid, and then we also have Formula Champions, which we're really excited about carrying, and I'll turn it over to Tyler.
Perfect. Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tyler Kappert. I work for Kalmbach Feeds. I grew up in the UP on a dairy farm. I showed pigs a little bit, so I'm no means a cattle expert. My goal today is just going to present our feed program a little bit, give you some more information and application for it. Kalmbach Feeds is the manufacturer and owner of the Formula Champions brand. What makes Kalmbach Feeds kind of stand out just a little bit from the competitors, we do fixed formulation on all of our Kalmbach feeds. Does everyone know the difference between like least cost formulation and fixed formulation? So the big difference with fixed formulation is the ingredients, the recipe, the ratio of all the products inside that bag never changes. They're always fixed. A lot of times least cost formulation is the grain market changes or the availability of products change, so does the recipe and formulation of what's in that bag. So that's a really big difference. Animals thrive on consistency with their feed. So we have really proven products. We've got a lot of winners out there. Formula Champions is probably at least 5 years old, so it's been around for just a little bit, but it's really growing fast. It's a really good product. There's a lot of market research a lot of research with our PhD nutritionists, and then also we've got a lot of guys on our sales team that are out there living the show cattle life. They're showing, they're breeding, club calves, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we have a big focus on the feed efficiency, feed conversion, and then gut health. Lastly, does everyone know how like a pelletized feed is made? Has anyone seen the process? It's pretty unique. There's not a lot of pellet mills in Michigan, but the way a pellet is made is basically it's mixed in this big batch, and then it gets kind of extruded or goes through this it's a big barrel, and it just spins really, really fast and pushes those pellets out, and the pellets kind of break off, and that's how you get your pellet. With our process, it goes through a screening process in a metal detector, so it screens all the fines out, so it leaves the higher quality pellets, and then throws out all the smaller pellets or the powder that gets left in the feed. And then after the bag is sealed, it goes through like a metal detector. And then if a bag has any trace amounts or a sliver of metal of any type, it just gets kicked out and goes right to the landfill. So it's a really safe feed. We really strive for consistency. Every time you open that bag, we want it to look exactly the same. All of our products are kind of made to order. So it's not like we have a big warehouse that just stores feed and we're making giant batches only once in a while. All of our feed is getting made every week, every other week. So when it leaves the plant, it's probably only a week or two old for most of the products. All right. So when we're feeding our cattle, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accentuate what's good on the steer, kind of improve what's could be improved on. So we're kind of looking for that thick, strong, level top line, a nice long neck, the trim throat, smooth shoulders, well-sprung rib, deep forerib. Those are all good talking points. That long, level, wide, full rump. And then with the heifers, we want that long, square, level rump, nice feminine head, strong, level, thick top, some spring of the rib, all that kind of stuff. So we've got a little bit of a feed program. So as we run through the pamphlet, so we've got the start, the grow, and the win. And then on the back, we've got a lot of show heifer feeds and some top dresses. So a lot of times we're starting out with like a show calf accelerator. That's probably from the breeder up to 500 pounds. So it's the perfect choice for steers and heifers with a creep feeding program, and then on to winning and prospect showing. All of our feeds have what's called Optifirm XL, and that is our patented pre and probiotic. So it's a yeast combination, and it's all just geared towards rumen health and gut health, and it's FDA approved, and it's like an all-natural yeast extract. So better digestion, less waste, less methane, increase in production, and feed efficiency. And that's in every bag of beef, lamb, swine, and goat with the Formula Champions. All right, so for the steers, a lot of times we'll go from the show calf accelerator and then go to the 1/3 Pro Grow. And everyone's got a sample of the 1/3 Pro Grow on the table. That's our #1 selling feed. So the steers are going to continue to grow. We're going to add bloom, mass, and rib shape. This is the perfect feed for late fall through most of winter to transition from a starting feed to a finishing feed. So it's got the Optifirm XL, and it's really versatile. A lot of times people are feeding it all the way to the end on those moderately framed steers. Like I said, #1 selling product. This is going to be a 12 protein, 14 fat, and 12 fiber. We also have the Pro Finisher. So this is the hottest, meaning the most calorie, most energy feed in the steer program we have. So we're going to use the Pro Finisher to add cover, finish the steers when the time is right, and we typically feed this late winter through spring. So it's also got the Optifirm XL. If you have a harder doing calf that you need more frame, you can feed it a little bit earlier in that winter. So a few years ago, we kind of upgraded our Formula Champions line, added a few new products, and kind of revamped them. So this formulation was similar to Corn Blend a couple years ago. So if you're familiar with the Formula Champions line, this is kind of replacing the Corn Blend product we used to have. So like I said, highest energy feed in the line, and it helps pack on the pounds. So great for steers and heifers. Another good product we have is called Mega Champ. So this is the ultimate feed to coast the steer into its target show. We use Mega Champ when the steer is close to target weight and finish. This product contains spelts. Has anyone ever heard of spelts before? It's like a bar. It's kind of looks like a barley. It's a lot of starch in it, but then there's also a lot of fiber on the outside. So it's like double coated fiber hull, basically is how I would describe it. But it's a really unique product. A lot of fiber, helps kind of fill up the gut. It's great for maintenance and will add bloom and fill. And then there's also barley in the Mega Champ, and that will add that final touch of cover for the steer. What's great about Mega Champ is it contains a couple of our supplements as well. So it's got supplements like Filler Up, Show and Glow. It's got an extruded fat nugget, and then of course the Optifirm XO. Kind of a step down from the Mega Champ is the Barley Blend. This is another product that Ovid is going to be stocking. It's a more basic option than the Mega Champ without the supplement. So Barley Blend will put the finishing touches on your steer and keep him from getting too fat. For those guys raising heifers, we've got Heifer Developer. The only option to grow your heifer while maintaining her feminine and refined condition while adding rib shape and depth. Most heifers will never get too fat on Heifer Developer. So it's got oats, spelts, cottonseed hulls, beet pulp. It's got a low level of corn to keep from over conditioning. Some people will use the supplement Filler Up on it and just add 1 or 2 pounds of feeding for that for a little more coverage. All right, Guts and Glory. So Guts and Glory is perfect when you need to add condition to the show heifer and explode rib shape. It's got the spelts, the main ingredient, and it'll also provide a source of fiber and energy. The bloom and dimension added with the Guts and Glory is unmatchable by any competitor's feed on the market. So this is another really good selling product we have. It's a 12 protein, 3.5 fat, and 14 fiber. All right, so for those steers, kind of our feeding program. So start with the 1/3 Pro Grow when you get that calf weaned at around 500 pounds. Then you go to the Pro Finisher, and from there, a Mega Champ or a Barley Blend, or you can feed the 1/3 Pro Grow all the way through. And then for the heifers, go on to the Heifer Developer, and then if you need a little more bloom and rib, you can go to the Guts and Glory after that. Does anyone here do dairy feeders? Awesome, we've got a good product for that. It's called Ultra Gain. So it's a high energy complete feed, ideal to use on the dairy feeders to maximize the bloom and average daily gain. It's a great option for beef cattle that are behind on gain and condition. So it contains Show and Glow, the extruded fat nugget, and also the Optifirm. So we got a great lineup of top dresses. Show and Glow, so it really helps improve the appetite and gut health. Really helps with skin and hair condition and feed conversion. Then we'll move on to the Afterburner, so it helps burn fat. It's a low feeding rate for those heavy conditioned animals. So perfect when you need more definition and muscle tone. Filler Up, that's a really good product. So it centers body dimension, some spring on rib. It's great for the show day. Just kind of fills them up, gets that fiber in the stomach, and helps expand that gut. Moonshine's actually a really nice product, so it's cherry flavored soybean oil almost, so it's really great for condition and gain. And if you're mixing your own feed or have your own little mix, it's great to add a little bit to that to get the cattle to not only eat more, but help cover up the dust and fines that you might have. All right, and then we'll wrap up with the Hair Magic Plus. So this is a hair growth supplement. It's got biotin, vitamin E, selenium, and yeast. It's a lower price per day compared to the competitor hair products. This is a product that really works. This was developed by a guy out in the thumb, and he's been testing it for a while and seeing really good results. It's melatonin free as well. A couple nice products we have is our 60-pound stress tub. We also make this in a 10-pound block. So that 10-pound block is perfect for those small pens, taking it to the fair so you don't got to lug around a big tub around. So we got the 60-pound stress tub, the 10-pound stress block. There's molasses and added fat for the rumen bugs. The licking action when you're feeding a block increases saliva production. There's potassium to help prevent and aid in shipping shrink. And then there's a high level of bypass protein. Kalmbach also has a complete line of minerals. So you got a breeder show stock mineral, selenium, zinc, copper, cobalt, free choice product. All right. So on all the feed tanks, there's going to be the feed directions, which is really important, but a good rule of thumb is the 2+2 rule. Has anyone ever heard of that? So you're feeding 2% body weight and then 2 additional pounds per day. So an example would be you have an 850-pound steer, 2% would be 17 pounds. You're going to add 2 to make it a total of 19. And of course, when you're switching feeds, try to do it over a 2 to 3 day transition, 4 to 6 feedings or so. And that includes introducing supplements. So add those supplements slowly. Livestock thrives on consistency. So when you're making those changes, it's stressful. One thing I always want to mention is when you're feeding, just don't go by the scoop. Always weigh it out. Feed has different densities. Some's a little bit more wet, some has more pellets or corn. It all weighs out different. So weigh that feed. A 1 pound scoop of one product is not really a 1 pound of another product, so they're not all created equal. So really weigh those feeds. Formula Champions we have like a jacket program. So on our Formula Champions website, just formulachampions.com. You just go on there. It's a really easy form. You submit a photo of what you won, and you get a really nice zip-up Formula Champions jacket. We also do Formula Champions Club Rewards. So on the back of every bag, there's a proof of purchase. So that's worth 25 cents. A lot of 4-H clubs collect those over the year. I've had 4-H clubs buy new little bleacher setups for their show ring. They usually put it back into the fairgrounds or something back to the club. So we usually write a couple of checks out for over a couple $100 every year to some 4-H clubs that are collecting that. So it's a good option to raise some extra funds. But yeah, Ovid, they've been great to work with. They can get any of our products. They're going to be stocking the 1/3 Pro Grow and the barley blend. Anything else they can special order, just work with them on letting them know ahead of time when you need a product. But they are more than happy to order whatever you guys need and usually get it to you guys pretty quick if you need to do a special order.
She has shown all over the state and basically on national shows too. And she also has had several champions in the key and the main and Jew breed divisions, so that's pretty impressive. She also coaches her county's livestock judging team, and in the past, those teams have gone to Keystone, North American, and National Western Stock Show, I believe. And then Kendra also coaches or helps out with the state Michigan 4-H judging teams. This year we don't have anything, but in the past she normally chaperones and helps us try out for the teams and stuff like that. Kendra, aside from that, she also gives showmanship lessons to beef and sheep kids, and she also judges shows and clips across the state. So that's Kendra.
Like Katie said, my name is Kendra. I'm from Allegan County. If at any time during this presentation, if you have any questions or you want to, know more information on something, please raise your hand. I'd be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you may have. So I'm here to talk to you guys about calf selection, primarily in the market beef. If there are questions on heifers, please let me know. I can talk to you about that as well, but my main focus today is going to be on market beef projects. So how many of you before have done any sort of livestock judging at all? What about judging anything in general? So you should all have your hands up because you guys make choices every day, okay? Picking out a calf is the same thing as going to Meijer to pick out a flavor of ice cream, cheesecake, whatever. It's the same kind of thing, okay? You have your basis of priorities and criteria that you select for. You don't, if you're going to the frozen food section and you go to find some ice cream, you don't just blindly pick one and ultimately you're happy with it, okay? So you have your list of criteria already in your head. Selecting for livestock is the exact same, okay? It really truly is. So you guys have all done it before, you do it every day in your lives, so it shouldn't be something that intimidates or scares anyone. For selection of market beef cattle, let's say, we have 4 different basis of priorities or criteria. The first is structure. The second is muscle and finish, if you have a finished beef animal. The third is volume. And the fourth thing is balance. So when we talk about structure, that's the framework, the bonework of how that animal's put together. When we talk about muscle, that's muscle shape, expression, width, mass. Talk about volume, that's how long-bodied that calf is, how much depth of rib and how much spring of rib that calf has as well. And we talk about balance and eye appeal. They're show cattle. They got to be pretty too. So that's all what that means. So I'll be honest with you, structure is my thing. So I am really picky on structure. It's the biggest thing that I select for because it's so important. Whether you're trying to raise a show steer, a feedlot steer, a heifer, you're trying to find replacements, you're picking a prospect calf. There are so many different reasons why structure is important, especially in your market beef projects. I help a number of families each year find calves, fit calves, clip for them, that sort of thing, and they'll probably tell you that muscle is it. It kind of is, but not really, okay? So why is structure so important? For a number of reasons, okay? First thing, it's longevity, okay? I know my county fair, we go until September. I know a lot of you guys probably have that July, August deadline kind of endpoint. Same thing. Those cattle have to be able to, as soon as they get to your barn, sometimes July, August, September, October, November, they have to survive pretty much another year, okay? If you think about it in terms of when they're born, when they go to get processed, they're a little bit over a year old when they go to get processed. So they have to have the structure in order to be able to carry them that full term. You don't want to invest money in an animal that doesn't have that proper structural integrity where you have to send him early, okay? You don't want that. That's a huge waste of money, huge waste of time. So in terms of longevity, it's incredibly important so you guys get to your final endpoint. Also, along with that is feeding ability, okay? If we have cattle that are structurally sound, they're a lot less stressed out, and they feed a lot more. Their meat quality is better, their finish is a lot better, and that's just also coupled with efficiency, how well they can convert that feed to energy. If your animal is so structurally unsound that it's hard for them to get up, get down, walk to and from the feed bunk, they're really, really stressed out. Their energy is going to go to getting up and getting down, not to converting that feed to actual body energy. You can carry more mass on a better skeleton, okay? It's just like building a car, okay? You're not going to put a car framework in terms of wheels and axles and body shape for a school bus, okay? It doesn't make any sense. It's not going to work, okay? So you have to have a really sound skeleton if you want to have all that mass up high and all that rib shape. More room for feed and water, okay? Longer skeleton, a more appropriate skeleton, put more feed and water into there. That turns into efficiency, okay? Turns into actual finish over those ribs. Gives you the framework for a finishing weight. In terms of goal setting, from kids that I primarily work with in my county, we do a little bit smaller, younger calves right away. You guys probably find the older, larger frame calves depending on your endpoint, okay? If we don't have that framework to get to their finishing weight, regardless of their endpoint, you're not going to set yourself up for success. But I'm not only talking about angles and how joints work and that sort of thing, it's also skeletal width, okay? If you get behind a heifer or a steer, bull, cow, whatever, and their pin set's about this wide, you can't put as much muscle over that framework if you only have this much area, okay? They have to get to and from that feed bump, okay? Just like I talked about earlier, if they're hurting, if they're in pain, they're not going to get up and eat, okay? It's easier for them to lay down. It's too much work. It hurts them too much to have to get up and get back down and walk to and from that feed bump if their skeleton hurts them. And the biggest thing that I hear is you hear people talk about, well, I'm at my county fair, my steer obviously made it, he's standing here in the stall for a week. Obviously his structure's good enough. I don't know why the judge put me farther down because my steer's not that sound. He made it here. Well, sure, he made it to your county fair, but a lot of people forget that they have to be able to get on that market truck, ride on that truck with a bunch of cattle that steer probably doesn't know. It's full, it's crowded, he's going to get banged around. They have to be able to ride, sometimes for hours, on that truck to that slaughter plant and be able to walk off that trailer under their own power. If your animal is structurally unsound, he's a lot more applicable to getting hurt, and he can go down. And at that point, they can't do anything with that calf. So just because you get that steer to his endpoint, he's not really to his endpoint until he's actually in that slaughter plant. So that's something that I think a lot of people forget about when they get their animal to their endpoint show. That's not necessarily that animal's endpoint. So the biggest thing to remember for structure, performance to function, as function is to performance. If you have one that's really well structured, really well put together, you can do a ton of winning, have a lot of success with that calf. You can build a really good one, and that calf is going to perform very well for you. Whether it's in the show ring, just gaining weight, accumulating muscle mass, anything like that, structure is very, very important. The biggest thing to remember is you have 2 degrees that you need to remember in terms of angles. Okay? One is 0 degrees. The other is, anybody know? 45. Okay? Always keep in mind that everything is connected. If there's an issue at the ground, you'll see it up high. Why is that? Because even though I'm standing here and I'm putting all my weight onto the ground, there's no give. Okay? If that calf isn't right in his ankles, the ground's not going to give. What's going to give? His skeleton all the way up and all the way to his spine. Okay? If you look at a calf and he's got a really level, strong top line, more times than not, he's probably pretty good at the ground. Okay? One thing that a lot of sellers and breeders and producers might tell you, oh, just a little time and that ankle click will go away. He'll grow out of that. It's not true. Okay? Structure does not get better. It only gets worse. Because as they put weight on, again, it's part of that stress on those joints and on those bones and the feet. It only gets worse. So if you go somewhere and they tell you he'll be fine, he'll grow out of it, it's just kind of a growing pain, they're just trying to sell you a calf. Okay? Structure does not get better. It only gets worse. So when I mentioned the 45-degree angle, the easiest way to look at that is in their shoulder. At the top of their shoulder, so their scapula, so the area where the top of their neck meets their spine, their shoulder blade should sit there. From that shoulder blade to the point of their shoulder should be a 45-degree angle. If that point of the shoulder sits lower and more inward, that calf's probably really straight shouldered. So what this means is if you ever see calves that they should stand pretty comfortably like this, okay? That nice kind of C shape in front of their front legs. If they're straight, they rotate forward. And as you can see, I couldn't do that without putting my shoulders forward. Cattle are the same way. 80% of that calf's body weight comes from right behind that shoulder all the way back. Okay? So as you can imagine, those shoulders take a lot of stress. They have a lot of power that's pushing onto those shoulders. You have to have a good shoulder angle in order to keep all that weight back and to keep your calf set appropriately. Okay? If it's already, so again, when you're looking at them when they're young and they start to gain more weight essentially gets into that 80% of that body capacity and just continues to push that skeleton forward. If they're already straight when they're young, it only gets worse, and eventually their knees will come out. Okay, and you don't want that. Okay, you want that nice 45-degree angle. You want a nice comfortable set to those knees and those front pasterns. You can also see 45-degree angles at the opposite side of their skeleton as well. You guys know where the hooks and the pins are? So this is basically the hip bone of that calf. The hooks are in the front, the pins are in the back. This should be your 0-degree angle. Okay, those hooks and pins need to be incredibly level. From that pin down to their stifle should be a 45-degree angle. Okay, that stifle should be that round muscle there, right where they flex and kind of move that rear leg forward. The stifle is actually your calf's true knee. Okay, from there should be a 45. From that stifle down to that rear hock should be a 45, and those rear pasterns should be at a 45-degree angle too. Okay, if that angle is a lot more steep, or sometimes there's too much flex and they sit too low, that calf structure isn't quite as ideal. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're able to draw those lines in our minds in terms of angles of where they need to be placed appropriately. In terms of evaluating just feet and legs, we want feet that are big, we want feet that are square. Okay? If we have feet that are really small, they're generally not as successful essentially out on the pasture. Okay? Especially with heifers and bulls and cows, if you've got really small feet walking in pastures with holes, your risk of injury gets a lot higher than animals with really big feet. Also, it's a maintenance issue. So if you have really small feet, you're going to be trimming those feet a lot. Or if they're out on pasture, they're going to be clipping those hooves, breaking those hooves off. You don't want that. It increases lameness, increases injury, and you don't want that to happen because then your cost goes up for that animal. And ultimately, you want that animal to be as successful as possible while being as low cost as possible as well. In terms of steers or market heifers, the size of that foot is a good indicator of how much bone that calf has. The size of bone is a good indicator of how much muscle that calf has as well. But again, it's another thing of it lessens your injury, or your chance of injury, lameness, and that calf getting hurt. So I always evaluate cattle starting at the ground, regardless of if it's a steer, heifer, bull, cow, whatever it may be, start at the ground. When I say square, those toes, they need to point forward, okay? We don't want them pointing this way in the front legs. This means that they're splay-footed, and this also means that the points of their shoulders will wing out a little bit. You don't want that, okay? You want them to be square. They need to point exactly forward. If they point in, their knees will wing out, their elbows will wing out. This means they're pigeon-toed. All of these things become an issue in terms of wearing down that hoof, okay? We don't want to wear down the insides. We don't want to wear down the outsides. We want those calves to be really square in terms of maintenance for their feet. If you look at them from the rear, we want those hocks to be exactly straight all the way to the ground. If you draw that line from the top, basically from their pins all the way down, there should be a nice straight line in terms of the direction those toes go. We don't want their hocks going out. We don't want their hocks going in. That line, that straight line, needs to start up high and go all the way down and basically split those dew claws in half. Okay? Toes need to point forward. Does that make sense? We don't want toes pointing out. We don't want toes pointing in. Okay? So in terms of management, let's say, regardless of what their shoulder structure is, what's a good management strategy that you guys can use to ensure that our shoulders stay in good shape? In terms of feeding, what's a good strategy in terms of feeding to make sure that we're not putting so much pressure and so much weight on those shoulders? How many guesses? So don't feed them on the ground. Okay, when you guys are at home, get those feed bunks up, get those hay bunks up, because, like I said before, 80% of that weight comes from the shoulder back. If we have our cattle eating down for most of the day, their shoulders open up, that weight pushes forward, and that can actually open up those shoulders, and we don't want that. How many of you guys show pigs here? Yeah? So you want really wide shoulders, you want those blades to be really pulled apart. Cattle, we do not want that. Okay, that's a pig thing only. So I know for my judging kids who grew up showing pigs and not cattle, it's a really hard thing for them to grasp sometimes, because in pigs you want that, in cattle we want nice smooth shoulders, a nice way to really make sure that those stay together really well. Feed them off the ground. Don't feed them in a feed pan on the ground every day. Get those feed pans up. Does that make sense? Same thing with hay. Get it off the ground. So, why do we not want big-shouldered steers? So, in heifers and in bulls, it's a calving ease dystocia issue. Why do we not want big shoulders in steers? So again, all that weight is going to push that calf forward. If those shoulders are already really opened up, over time, if not managed properly, or, I mean, sometimes it doesn't even matter if you do it properly, all that weight that pushes forward, if those shoulders are so far out, you can start to make that calf roll forward in terms of their structure. Okay? When those shoulder blades and their shoulders are in, they can actually push against all of that weight and they level out really well. Okay? They have that, it's like doing a push-up. Okay? So I don't do a lot of push-ups, clearly, but I have a lot of friends who like to do that crazy thing stuff. So shoulders are out wide, it's a lot easier to get to the ground. Your hands are here, it's a lot harder to get to the ground, just in terms of spacing. So it's kind of the same concept. So when you start talking about selection, we have to keep some things in mind too. There are things that are called inverse traits and things that are very trendy, okay? A lot of people I work with, when they go to look for a steer, the first thing they look at is how stout that steer is. I get it. But at the same time, a lot of times if you have a really, really stout-ended calf, you're going to get a little bit of shoulder to come with that. So you have to find a happy medium, or you've got to find a calf that's really good shouldered and really stout. I could never afford those kind, but my budget was different than a lot of other people's as well. So keep those things in mind, okay? It's when they're young, it's really easy to get caught up in a really, really stout, calf. But if their structure is not there, if they've got really wide shoulders, that calf, more times than not, is not going to have a really successful future as a fat steer, okay? So we need to make sure that our cattle are built really, really well. They're really smooth in their shoulder, and then from there you can do a lot of work at home to get more of that muscle mass. So in terms of muscle, some areas that we can look on our calves to evaluate how much muscle that calf actually has. Look at their forearm. I know in pigs this is a lot more prevalent, same with sheep. Cattle, it's kind of, I think, underrated. Okay, the forearm is that muscle right above their knee and their front leg. How full is that? How wide is that? How much shape does that forearm have? The stifle joint that I talked about earlier. The quarter. So when you look behind that calf, you find their hocks, their quarters are here. Okay? How wide, how full, how expressive are those inner and lower quarters? The width of hip. How wide-hipped are these cattle actually? Not how much hair they have, not how well they're clipped, how actually skeletally wide and stout that muscle is when you look at them over the top and in their hip. Top shape. When you look down these cattle, we want them to have some top shape. Okay? The most expensive cut of meat on a steer is their loin. They should have a big, wide, square, thick loin. Okay? And when we look at them from the back side of that shoulder, they should open up with a lot of shape that goes all the way back, all the way throughout their tail head. Okay? So we don't want cattle that are really narrow topped. We want them to be thick all the way back from where their shoulders come and open up. In terms of that shape, in terms of, so what's a good way to know if we have an animal that is going to be lean and have a lot of shape, and it's not just hair or just a narrow topped animal? It should look like a Coke bottle, okay? Actually, can I steal somebody's plastic water bottle from that table? Coke bottles work a little bit better for this analogy, but kind of bear with me. Their widest point should be here at the top side of their shoulder, and then here in their hip, okay? We want cattle that are square and full all the way down. Cattle that are light muscled and fat are the narrowest here and the narrowest here. They look like kayaks or canoes, okay? So we want cattle to still be wide and square here, but this shouldn't be, in terms of their top shape, the widest part of that calf when you view them over the top. And this is disregarding actual belly, okay? This is true top shape. That calf needs to be wide in their hips, and then they need to be square and go into their shoulder real nice at the top. Does that make sense? We don't want to make cattle that are shaped like this when viewed from the top. That means they're really light muscled and probably pretty fat when they get to their finished degree. I love thick-ended steers just as much as the next person. They've got to have some good structure too. So I was really successful with a lot of steers that weren't quite as massive, weren't quite as stout in the beginning, but were really good structured. And I put a ton of work in at home. And those calves in those steers that were really complete, at the end of the day at my fair, the Old State Fair, MLE, that sort of thing, were a lot more successful than the cattle that were really explosive, pulled apart, and just massive in the beginning that didn't have that structure to hold up with all that mass. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're looking for your calf for next year. Volume. Yeah.
So we had a steer last year that when we brought in was one of the bigger ones at the farm. And then as he grew, he still continued to be the greenest and just didn't finish out like we had hoped.
Yep.
How do you tell the difference between them turning out like that and just being green at the beginning?
Yeah, very excellent question. So you're actually going to lead me into my next talking point, which is volume. Okay? So luckily for you, I love green calves because us Allegan people who have really late fairs, that's what we need. So this is where you actually have to look for true spring of rib, true depth of body, true length of side, and just also knowing, being able to read flanks and read sternum levels to be able to see if that calf is actually going to finish out and put weight on. So, I'm actually going to roll into volume, and hopefully it answers your question. If it doesn't, ask me again, okay? So, volume is spring of rib, length of body, depth of body. This is one of my, and I don't want to get in a soapbox, I really don't, but this is one of my biggest pet peeves in terms of this inverse trait. Does anybody know a good kind of way to indicate if that calf's going to be a little bit bigger bellied or easier feeding just by looking at them? So you can actually kind of see it in their head and neck, okay? So the inverse trait in cattle is if they're really skinny and sleek-necked, really long-fronted, really tight in their neck, oftentimes they're a lot tighter and flatter in terms of their rib shape, okay? You have cattle that have a little extra in terms of their neck. A lot of times they're going to have a little extra in terms of their rib shape. They're going to feed a lot easier. I know it's incredibly trendy now to pick big-bellied, clean-fronted cattle, and this is why. They're hard to make. But we've kind of come to a point in our industry where we've selected for really pretty necks for the last 2 years, and now we have cattle that are two-dimensional in terms of their rib shape. They're too flat, they're too shallow, and they don't feed out well. Why is that? Because they don't actually have that true rib shape to hold enough feed to convert that feed to gain, okay? They're hard doing is what we call them, okay? They're hard doing, they don't have that shape, they don't have that capacity to hold enough feed to convert that feed to the outside energy, okay? I'm not saying go find the dirtiest fronted calf in the world, I'm not saying that at all. That's one of those, again, happy mediums. That if you can find one that is really big-bellied, that is really sleek-fronted, congratulations. Those are the cattle that are doing really well right now. But as an industry, we're finding ourselves that we've kind of selected away from things like rib shape, things like skeletal width, things like muscle. At the end of the day, these are beef animals, okay? They belong on plates. Okay? You can't eat a pretty front end. You can't, okay? So, in terms of talking about that volume, we need to have cattle that have that true rib shape. And I don't mean fill, okay? I know that they need to be really big-bellied, soggy-bellied. There's a difference between having a lot of fill and having actual rib shape, okay? If you have cattle that, when you look at them, they can be really high up here, they get kind of narrow, and they get really wide down here, that's all fill. That's a feed bucket, okay? If you have cattle that open up out of their spine and get wider as they go down, and they continue that actual true width, and they have that actual shape, that's true rib shape. So we need to have long-bodied cattle in order to fit all that meat, all that muscle, all that shape, and all that feed inside of them. So rib shape is a great indicator of how well that calf is going to feed and how they're going to mature. Our fourth thing, balance and eye appeal. If you are a feedlot producer, you do not care about this last portion. If you're a feedlot producer, you care about things like muscle, finish, volume, structure, not balance, because you can't eat balance. Okay, that's not how you get paid. Us show cattle people, they've got to be pretty, they've got to be attractive. Okay? When I talk about balance or eye appeal, it's really as easy as it sounds. How pretty are they? Okay? Things to look for in a well-balanced calf: really long and level and strong top line. That goes into a nice level and square tail head. Their head and neck should sit really high on the top side of that shoulder and should come up and go out. Okay? Kind of look like a snake head almost. I don't like snakes, so it weirds me out, but it's the best analogy I have. So we want really long and skinny necks, long skulls with enough shape and enough width if they're steers, a little narrower, a little longer if they're heifers. You want them to be really level there in terms of their hip. And in terms of that underline and their volume, you want them to be deep in their forerib, deep in their rear flank, deep all the way through, and to be really uniform and really level. You don't want cattle that, as soon as you look at their shoulder, they come up really high in their gut, and they go down really, really low, and they get sucked up again in terms of their rear flank. It's another indicator of cattle that have a lot of fill or a nice feed bucket, but not actually true shape and dimension in terms of that rib cage. Okay? So, a question I get a lot, I should back up a little bit. A question I get a lot is, well, how do I know if a calf just has a really high chest floor, or if that calf is actually going to be really tight in their forerib? You have to evaluate that sternum. So, on us, it's the bone that comes and splits that rib cage. It's the same on cattle. If that sternum sits low enough, and that's in it, and looking at their underline, if it's really level and really smooth there, that's a calf that is really good in their underline. It's a calf that truly has that depth of forerib, versus a calf that their sternum sits really high and they open up behind their shoulder and they're really tight there in their forerib, and then all of a sudden they come out. Again, that's a feed bucket. Okay, that's not actually true shape and true width in terms of that rib cage. That's a really good way to look to see how true that animal really is in terms of their rib cage and all that shape. And it ties into balance and eye appeal. So also, their brisket. We don't want cattle to have really big, full briskets. We want them to be nice and tight, nice and clean. Again, really smooth shouldered, really high in terms of their neck, really clean in terms of their front 1/3. If you have a calf that's really good structured, good in their muscle pattern and muscle shape, and they have good volume, balance is already 90% there. They're just made that well. That last 10% is going to be that head and that neck. Okay, how pretty and how clean that is. So, with my judging kids, I like to tell them that their livestock basically is like a taco. Okay, a hard shell taco. In terms of structure, that's your shell. Okay, that shell holds all of your things that you're going to eat in that taco together, just like the skeleton on a calf. The actual meat in that taco is the same as the muscle shape in your actual calf. I like a lot of meat in mine. Some people might like a little more lettuce or volume in theirs. That's totally fine too. That lettuce is what pushes that shell apart a little bit. It offers some more room for things like salsa, things like guacamole, cheese, that sort of thing. And how pretty you organize that stuff in your taco is ultimately how well how much you want to eat it. Same with cattle. I'm not that picky on how good that taco looks. I'll eat it anyways. But if you crack that shell and everything kind of falls apart, you don't really have a taco anymore. You kind of have a salad. Okay? And so if your ultimate goal is to have that taco, you need to have that structure. You need to have that meat. You need to have that lettuce in there to encapsulate how well that taco looks. Okay? If you're going to pick out, let's say this taco is all smashed and this one's all neat and tidy and put together, this one is going to be the one that the vast majority of us pick to eat. It just looks better. It's the same thing with cattle. Okay, or sheep or hogs or goats, whatever you're looking at. If you have good structure, volume, muscle mass, and shape and design, that balance, they're going to be well balanced enough. Okay? So it's just that head and that neck that sometimes you've got to select a little bit differently for. So, my biggest advice to you guys, before you go to any operation, you need to establish a kind of a guideline for yourselves. And I'm going to give you some pieces of advice. Telling you, structure, structure, structure. They have to be sound. They need to be sound if you want to be successful. I found a lot of success with having cattle that just are adequate in terms of their volume, adequate in terms of their muscle shape, adequate in terms of their eye appeal, coupled with a really, really good structural sound, skeleton. That's going to carry you a lot farther than an animal that's just the stoutest one in the pen, or the biggest bellied in the pen, or the prettiest fronted in the pen. Okay, we've got to find cattle that are complete. Okay, please do not single trait select. Okay, my judging kids do it all the time, and it drives me crazy. Do not single trait select. You will be very, very disappointed. You have to have enough of all four of those things to have a complete animal, and I promise you'll be successful. You need to establish a management program. Okay, what kind of facilities do we have? You do not have to have the Taj Mahal in order to be successful, okay? Just having, in terms of floor, don't put them on concrete. That's a great way to, if your cattle don't have structural problems, that's a great way to give it to them, okay? As they get older, that's a lot of stress. It's a lot of weight on those feet and legs and on those joints. A lot of swelling occurs. They can slip. They can scrape themselves. I like to keep my cattle on dirt. Okay, whether you use straw, shavings, whatever, don't keep them on concrete if you can. Also, make sure you have good ventilation. Okay, don't keep your cattle in this really enclosed space with no ventilation. Okay, if they can't breathe well, again, it's a stress thing. I know Tyler talked about it in terms of feed. A great program has cattle that are very, very stress-free. They need to be able to breathe well. They need great ventilation, and that also helps with keeping those cattle healthy. You don't want your cattle to get sick. So we keep fans on our cattle all year long. Doesn't matter if it's the middle of January, if it's the middle of July. Fans all the time. I promise you they'll lay under them in the wintertime. They sweat in the wintertime too. So, and that just helps keep that air moving. It helps keep that air going in terms of ventilation. Establish a feed program. Tyler talked about this. Carrie talked about this. And I'm not just saying this to, blow smoke or anything like that. My family still feeds Kalmbach. We fed it for a lot of years, had a lot of success with it. So I know that Tyler and Carrie and everybody else at the elevator here would be more than happy to help you guys establish a good feed program for your animals. So not everybody has a ton of money to buy all the fancy show feeds. I work with families who are in that situation too. But working with people like Tyler, like Katie, like Carrie, they can help you establish a good solid base of nutritional requirements that your cattle need to make sure that you can still be successful on a lower budget. It can be done. Establish goals. So if your goal is to just show at your fair, great, awesome. You should be very proud of that. If your goal is to try to win MLE, great, awesome. Be very proud of that. If your goal is to try to win your county fair, great, awesome. Be proud of that too. Knowing your goals is going to help you establish a great management program. It's going to help you find people to help you, but also it gives you a sense of direction of where to go. For myself, when I couldn't buy steers that were born in February for my fair. They're too old, they're too stale, they're too mature for my fair at that time when I still was young enough to show. So knowing your endpoints, knowing those goals is going to help you better pick and better select a project or animal that will help you meet those final goals. Establish a budget. Okay? I work with families that spend $2,000 a year up to $50,000 a year on one animal. Okay? Doesn't matter. Okay? If you don't have a good feeding program, if you don't have a good management program, if you don't know how to pick one out, price tags are irrelevant. Okay? They really truly are. But in terms of establishing that budget, you know that if I go to, this operation and all their cattle are out of my budget and I can't spend any more, you know that you're probably not going to buy a calf there. You kind of set yourself to know, okay, well, I know, these places have steers that are more in my budget. These guys probably don't have those cattle that are more in my budget, okay? And that's totally fine. I couldn't spend a ton either when I showed, okay? but knowing how to select for one, knowing how to manage one, will get you just as far as the people that can spend Uga dollars. Okay? So, also seek out help. Find people, pick their brains, ask them questions, and listen. Okay? So, I could ask questions daily about everything and anything. But the people who are successful, whether it's to me or other people, they listen. Okay? So, that's, in terms of communication, there are two ends to that word. Listening, but also asking and speaking. So, you have questions, find people who have been successful, find people who are successful, and ask them for help. I promise you they will not tell you they won't help you. And if they do, find the next person. I've never been told that I won't help you by literally anybody, whether I bought livestock for them or not, or from them, work with them, doesn't matter, okay? So, if you have somebody at your fair that is always successful, always, doing well, you have two choices. You can either ask them for help, try to work with them, or you can just keep doing what you're doing and continue to get beat by them, okay? You can always learn, you can always improve, you can always get better. Nobody knows everything. Regardless of who you think people are, they're still learning. So, seek out help, ask questions. I promise people are there to help you, but you also need to be a great listener and follow through on the things that they tell you to do. Try to buy from recognized and reputable programs, okay? So this means, for myself, I really value honesty and integrity, okay? I can go to a bunch of places and I trust my eye enough to say, yeah, they're just feeding me a line of whatever to get me to try to sell this calf for them. Or people that say, this animal, this is what it is. Yep, I can see it. Okay? Or people that are going to be honest with you and say, I can help you do these things. I can help you get to these points. This is what I'm going to do. Buy from people who you trust and who you think are going to actually help you. If you hear bad things about an operation from several different people, that might be saying something. I'm not saying that they're right, but use your best judgment. Go into every operation kind of with a little bit of caution until you establish that relationship. But it's a really great idea to buy from reputable operations. They're successful for a reason. Okay, so and what do you want your purchase to include? Okay, do you want that to come with someone who's going to clip and fit for me? Someone who's going to come up and look at my calf and tell me, how to adjust feed, how to, adjust different management things. Are they going to help me with showmanship? Are they going to help me find a calf for next year? Are they going to go to shows and be there for me? Or are they just going to sell me a calf, cash my check, say, best of luck to you, let me know how it goes, okay? So regardless of what you want, there are people that do all sorts of different things depending on what you want. So make sure that you have those things in mind before you go and select for that calf. Also, breeds, shows, divisions in particular, okay? Do you want to buy a calf that can be double registered or can show in, the Sim Solution division or the Hereford division, okay? Knowing those things can help you narrow down places to go in order to find what you want to meet those goals, okay? If you're looking for a Hereford steer, you probably are not going to go to a purebred Angus breeder, okay? Just kind of one of those things. So, just one of those things that establishing what breed you want, which divisions you want to show in, can help point you in the right direction of where you need to go, kind of set your budget, your management program, your feeding program, all sorts of those things. So, in terms of growth, I know I didn't talk about this really at all yet, but what's a great indicator in terms of maturity and frame size? Where's the one area that I can look on a calf to say, oh, they're probably not going to be big enough, they're going to be finished out, at a really large frame, a really large weight? Where's one area that I can look at who's going to tell me how tall or how small that calf's going to be? Huh? Yeah, so cannon bones, okay? So the cannon bone is between their front knee and their front pastern. It's that bone that's about here, okay? If it's really short, that calf's not going to grow very tall. If it's really long, that calf's probably going to be pretty tall, okay? That bone really doesn't grow. It does just a little bit, but not very much, okay? So if you go out there and you see this calf and he's got like this much space for that cannon bone, he's not going to be very big. Okay? If they're like this, they're going to be really, really tall. Okay? So in terms of goal setting, do I want a steer to finish out at 1450? Probably not. Do I want a calf to finish out at 1100? Probably not. If I want to be in that industry range of about 1300, right around there, I've got to find a calf with a cannon bone length that's going to get me there. Okay, so reading those cannon bones, reading those feet sizes are going to be great indicators of how tall or how small that calf's going to be, and it's going to play a huge role in terms of your management program. So I have a picture of the growth curve on here. So I can kind of explain it a little bit, but there's plenty of charts online. So let's say we have, might be a little backwards, so I apologize. Our X and Y axis here. This is point 0 here. This is when the calf was born. Okay? So the bottom line is time, and this is actual growth of that animal. Okay? So when they start here, they grow the most in the shortest amount of time when they're young. And then they kind of hit this little plateau mark where they stop growing actual frame and they start to actually put on fat. So in terms of energy, when they get to this plateau spot here, their energy is not from their feet is not going to go to actual frame size. It's going to go to fat. So in terms of reading those cannon bones, will kind of give you a better idea of where on that chart your calf's going to be. If it's got really small cannon bones, he's going to be here. Okay? If he's really tall, he's going to be here. Okay? You want cattle to kind of be in that center part of that graph. So also do your part and listen. Okay? It is your choice what to listen to, but I like to take bits and pieces from everywhere that I kind of go. Okay? Biggest thing is I always try to learn. Okay? I'm still learning too. Don't ever think that you know everything because nobody does. So always be willing to ask for help, but also listen and learn. Watch those successful people, and don't make excuses. Okay? That's the bottom line. So you can either make excuses and make it easier on yourself, or you can actually ask for help, listen, try to get better, do more goal setting, and try to meet those goals. It is a lot harder, but you're actually going to get farther in where you want to go, instead of just saying, oh, well, I can't spend that kind of money, or my barn's not as nice as the next person's, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Good management, good selection, finding the right people to work with, that's really the key. Okay? Also have fun. So I hope you guys do this because you think it's a lot of fun. If there ever comes a point where you're not having fun, then it's just work. Then it's just miserable. Okay? So make sure that every time that you go and find a new calf, a hog, a lamb, a goat, whatever you're buying, make sure that you always find the fun in what you're doing. So thank those who help you. You don't do it by yourself. Okay? I've had a lot of people when I grew up, and even still now, who are continuously helping me grow, helping me learn. Always thank those people for their time because they don't have to do those things. But also give back. I've learned a lot more from teaching and coaching and mentoring than I ever have from any other person. Okay? If you can take what you've learned and help give those things back to other people, you'll learn a lot more, but you'll build a lot better relationships. And there's a lot of pride that comes with that. Yeah? Yeah, so this is also something I should have put on the slide, so thanks, in terms of, selection, in terms of what you want. So if you go into a field and there is a calf that immediately jacks his head up, his ears go up, and he starts to run circles, probably a little hot-headed, okay? If it's your first year and you're like 9 years old, you probably should stay away from that one, okay? If there's a calf that, you can walk in there, he just kind of looks at you but doesn't really mind, probably a lot more quiet. The thing with attitude as well too is if you get cattle that are really high strung like that, a lot of times they don't feed as well because their energy goes to them to be crazy, not to actually put fat on. So it looks cool. You walk in that pasture and they jack their heads and their necks up and they look sweet. But if they are actually, if they've got the big whale eyes, if they're actually a little bit nutty, good luck feeding them, okay? So their energy goes to them to be crazy. One thing I didn't really talk about that I should have, in terms of their shoulder structure, a lot of people can't really see the angle right away. So if you go in a field or in a pasture, wherever, and that calf is walking, and they never really pick their head up, and you can see that they're trying to, and everyone else is kind of walking and their head and their necks are up, and you've got this calf that's just kind of like doing this whole number, it's probably because their shoulders are a little bit rolled forward. They don't have the angle in their shoulder to be able to push their neck and their head back in order to get that up. So that's a really kind of easy way to say, okay, well, you know, and sometimes they're just really tame. So if they're really tame and you can pet them and everything else, you know, and if you think their angle's okay, they're probably just really tame, really broke. But if that calf is walking with the rest of the group and they never really pick their head or their neck up, probably for a reason. So that's kind of a good way to start to, you know, to then go to that angle of that shoulder. Oh, I think this is a little bit steep. Okay? You want those knees to be really relaxed. If their legs are like this, they're straight. It only gets worse. So thank you for that, Carrie. So you know, if you walk into that field and they're just running circles, blowing snot, they're probably going to be a little hot. So I'm not saying they can't be broke. Probably just take you a lot more time, or if you know, if you're a really small kid, you're really new, you might want to find a different one. And that's something too, when you go to different places, if you make purchases, does it come broke? Are you buying it right out of the field? Make sure those calves have been vaccinated and dewormed. Talk about, you know, feed that those animals are on. Let's say they're not on the Kallenbach feed, but you want to feed the Kallenbach feed. Have them, you know, they should send some feed home with you, so that way you can make that transition, so that way it's not as stressful on them. So, other great things to ask those producers of, is he broke to tie, is he broke to lead, or am I just pulling him out of the pasture, and best of luck to me. So those are also things to talk about with the producer when you're selecting calves too, depending on what you want. Honestly, if they're going to be broke, generally they cost a little more money because it takes time to do that. So just kind of have that in mind. When your list of requirements gets longer, normally the dollar sign gets a little bit higher. So keep that in mind. And that is all that I have for you guys.
Thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. We also we stock some Sullivan products, and we can custom order any Sullivan products that you guys also need. So if you guys ever need to order anything, especially getting ready for show season, just give us a call or come in, and we can order anything that you might need. Save maybe a little bit on shipping or whatever. So just let us know if that's something that you guys need to do. Like I said, we also have delivery on feed. And any other questions that anybody has, just